මව්බිමට දෙවැනි කොට සිතන්නෙමු දෙව්ලොවේ නැති අසිරි මව්බිමේ දකින්නෙමු පරිසරය රකින්නෙමු වඩන්නෙමු වවන්නෙමු මේ පිළිනයෙන් සදා මව්බිමට බැඳෙන්නෙමු
Welcome to the Solve Climate Global Dialogues. You're participating in one of 125 events held across the planet, including in almost all 50 U.S. states, part of a global project called Solve Climate by 2030. My name is Eben Goodstein, and I'm an economist and director of the Graduate Programs in Sustainability at Bard College in New York, the lead organizer for Solve Climate. This last year has been difficult for everyone. As the world looks forward to recovery from COVID, we are focusing tonight on the most important question facing humanity. What can we do in this year in our regions to help solve climate change while supporting struggling communities that have faced widespread loss of life, economic disaster, and joblessness? Worldwide, from Australia to Kyrgyzstan, from Colombia to Malaysia, and from South Carolina to South Africa, Solve Climate audiences are hearing from local experts and young leaders about concrete steps that can really help nations solve climate change while creating much-needed jobs and incomes for everybody. The year 2020 was one of the two hottest years in human history, bringing with it massive forest and grassland fires, record-breaking storms and hurricanes, and relentless rising seas. Solving climate is the challenge which the human species must now face. There's hope for the future. Solutions have continued to advance. This year, China committed to building a carbon-neutral economy, while the U.S. rejoined the Paris Agreement. Solar, wind, and battery prices continue to fall, while major car companies have been rushing to electrify the global fleet. Worldwide, movements for Black Lives Matter and Me Too are leading in bringing much delayed and urgently needed justice to the world. Time is short. We have until 2030, 10 years to solve climate. We can get a lot done in this decade. We have the solutions, but only if we focus the world on climate solutions and justice, and then do the work we have to do in our own cities and regions. For students listening, you are the leaders. Without you, the future we envision will not come. I'm asking tonight for your help. We're going to discover powerful ideas for climate solutions and climate justice and how you can be a part of the solution. But this message must reach beyond those of us who are listening right now. Would you ask all your teachers this week in every subject to make climate a class? The teacher can assign tonight's webinars homework for the students and then afterwards have a one-class period discussion. And we mean every subject, from art to engineering, psychology to business, dance to chemistry. Teachers don't need to be a climate expert to lead a discussion about climate change. The Solve Climate project has easy-to-use teacher's guides in nearly every subject and in 3 languages to help teachers make climate relevant to their class. It only takes courage. Don't take no for an answer. Ask them, why not? This is your future. You'll be surprised how many teachers will say yes and thank you. Imagine you, thousands of leaders like you around the world asking their teachers once every school term to make climate a class. That means every term going forwards, hundreds of thousands, millions of students worldwide in their classes talking about climate solutions. COVID has shown how fragile our global economy and society are to extreme events. It's also shown that vulnerable people are facing the hardest, most damaging impacts. This is also true with climate change. Science has made it clear that unchecked, global warming will mean an unending onslaught of extreme events, causing untold suffering for humanity and all creatures, species driven to extinction, a planet of environmental refugees. And yet, in many ways, this is the most exciting time to ever be alive as a human. We have the tools and networks and technologies to rewire the world with clean energy, reimagine the global food system, reinvent transportation, and regenerate forests and grasslands, and be well on our way to solving climate by 2030. Tonight, we will learn how to do this in our own cities, our own towns, our own regions. Thank you for the work you will do to promote climate solutions and a just world.
It's my pleasure to welcome everybody to day 2 of this very, very inspiring dialogue, which we started yesterday. And of course, yesterday was a very cracking day. We had lots of very exciting presentations. So if you are just joining today, you missed, but like the saying goes, better late than never. So welcome again, everyone. I wouldn't be having too much delay because yesterday was a very, very cracking day. We had very inspiring discussions around climate change and its effects. And if you're joining us for the first time today, welcome on board. I have to say you missed yesterday, but better late than never. And I'm sure our speakers. Oh, right. Okay. You only missed the last minute or two, so I wouldn't have to go over what I've said earlier. Okay. Brilliant. So I am Dr. Justin Okoli from Leicester Castle Business School, De Montfort University, Leicester. So I'm thousands of miles away from South Asia, but I'm glad with the aid of technology like Zoom, we can all come together despite our locations, okay? So welcome to day 2, and this is Regional Dialogue on Climate Change Solutions, South Asia, and it's an event that is co-hosted by the International Journal for Community Resilience in conjunction with the Center for Environmental Policy, Bard College in the US, okay? So just to say, very quickly before I hand over to the speakers for today, because I know they are very, very ready. We are also itching, to get going. Just to ask people to unmute themselves, please, if you don't mind, to avoid disruption. As you know how this sort of internet can sometimes play out, but would have times to discourse, and that is a big lesson we picked from yesterday as well. So we just go straight to the point, and hopefully we can have about 15 minutes of discussion. So we all know the rules. The speaker have got half an hour to crack on with their topic, exciting topics, I have to say. And, after each discussion, we move straight to the next discussion and then to the third discussion, or to the talk rather. And then afterwards, we have a commentary that we can all run together. So by all means, we encourage everybody to put in their questions on the chat box, okay? So the chat box is just on the bottom of the page. You can type out your questions, and hopefully we have time to read those out in due course, okay? So without much ado, I'll just welcome the first speaker. I wouldn't bother to welcome the 3 of them at the same time. So I'll read the biography very, very quickly. And as you know, today's theme is around the bigger umbrella of climate change adaptation and mitigation. Okay, so we'll be looking at issues around these constructs. And the first speaker we have here is Charitha Ratwat, Junior, and is the head for group sustainability at Dialog Axiata PLC at Sri Lanka. He's got a BSc Honours in Information Systems from Manchester Metropolitan University, UK, and an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business with certificates from the Public Management and Global Management programs. As an inaugural Stanford Social Innovation Fellow, he founded Rural Returns Guarantee Limited, Sri Lanka, a non-profit company that works with rural communities to create sustainable pathways out of poverty. He's the founding director of the Brian Gain organization, SL2 College, and has served as a member of the Human Resource and Education Steering Committee of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. He currently serves on the board of study of the Postgraduate Institute of Agriculture, University of Perandenia. Okay, so it's a pleasure and an honor to welcome Charita Ratwaith. Over to you, Charita.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Very clearly.
Okay. So, Aiban, Wanakam, Assalamu alaikum. Good to be on this. I will just give me a second to set a stopwatch and I will get started. So Novil wasn't sure. I was very excited to hear that students from Kyrgyzstan might also be involved in this program, and I'm guessing that they are not actually involved in it. But I was so excited that I pulled out my old Kyrgyz hat that I got as a gift when I went to Kyrgyzstan. So if there is anybody from Kyrgyzstan on this, happy to meet you and hope to come to your country again someday soon. So let me get my slides running. And I know that you have to be careful about how you share these on Zoom. So let's get this right. Share screen, share sound. Here we go. Okay, I guess you can see my slides. Justin, are my slides visible?
Visible.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely, it is, yeah.
Okay.
It is.
So thank you for the introduction, Justin. I don't have a lot more to say now, but from the private sector perspective, I thought that it would be good to give a few examples. So I'm no, climate person. I'm no PhD in anything. I'm not an expert in any of this stuff. But as a person who's been working as kind of a practitioner in some of these areas, I thought I would give some examples of how the private sector is also a very necessary part of the solution that we need to achieve for climate mitigation and even recovery. So some of the topics that we were asked to talk about were green recovery, climate solutions, and climate justice. So I will try to give one or two examples from each of these, which is how the rest of this presentation will go. So as you would have seen, even my previous slide, the image was from a paddy field. And Justin mentioned that I set up a nonprofit working with paddy farmers. So this again is another photograph from a rice nursery. So if you get me started on the subject of rice and Sri Lanka's traditional rice varieties, I might never stop. I will try to give just a very quick reason as to why agriculture and cultivation of certain varieties of crops is important for green recovery, for climate justice and all these things. So as Justin said, I'm a recovering software engineer. So generally when I'm presenting to students or people from the tech industry, I put up this slide and ask, what do you think I'm doing in this field? So anybody who has actually walked in a paddy field may notice something immediately. I won't stop to ask the audience, but basically you might see that this paddy field that we are standing in, the plants are actually taller. They are not even full grown, but they're actually already taller than the plants in a modern conventional paddy field would look like. So that's a clue as to what I was doing standing in this field with these farmers. But like I said, this is about smallholder agriculture, smallholder paddy. And this is the kind of, some of the paddy fields that you find in Sri Lanka are on hillsides. These are terraced lots. Where you can't even fit a two-wheeled hand tractor on here. So you can't mechanize, you can't do a lot of the amazing, modern, cheap, scalable things that would happen in other paddy fields. You can't do it here. But this is where this farmer happens to have land and where he's cultivating. So what can we do for people like this to make sure that they are included in the economy, and in being the solution for climate recovery. So what I have been working on, you would have seen in that photograph I spent some time on as well, is one of the biggest problems in agriculture is pests, diseases, and weeds. So you can see this example of a weed, and again in this photograph, you can see that the weeds are actually taller than the paddy plants. So they are obviously and immediately going to reduce the profitability, productivity, quality of what can be produced in that field. But how do you control weeds? Nowadays, we think that you can only control weeds by either hammering weedicides into the paddy fields, and there's a lot of literature and even hysteria about what excessive use of weedicides and other chemicals does directly and indirectly when you use it in agriculture. There are other nice in theory but very difficult to do in practice things that you can do which could control weeds, but on a cost-benefit basis for a smallholder farmer is usually not feasible or worthwhile doing. So I'll give an example later. But what I was working on was these varieties of rice that are nothing new. They are thousands of years old. They are called, they're actually called traditional varieties in Sri Lanka, but they are basically pre-Green Revolution varieties of rice. None of us on this video call would be alive or would have a much lower quality of life if not for the Green Revolution. I am not saying that the Green Revolution should not have happened. However, we probably we overdid it, and we maximized on yield, and we ended up with cultivation that ended up going towards monocropping and plants that lost some of the robustness that the traditional paddy varieties had. Why do I say that? Because these traditional varieties, one thing, they are much more varied. Each of them has different qualities that the other doesn't have. This variety you can see here is called Rat Kanda. Rat is red. Kanda is trunk or body. As you can see, the leaves are purplish red, right? So you may never have seen a field that looked like this. They are all unique, but they also have a few things in common. They're much more robust, like I said. Several of them can be cultivated in areas that have saline intrusion and no other paddy plant can grow, which is one of the things that's happening with climate change. As water tables go in, as seas come in, that's a big problem. They are also much more stress tolerant, drought tolerance, as well as flood tolerant. They are able to keep growing and not die even if they get inundated for several weeks at a time. So that's what I was working on. And again, like I said, so this is only the bigger bowl here is the actual milled rice. The others are just a seed. You can see it's not like any rice seed you may have seen before, if you have seen them. So for a while I was doing this, and if you get the joke, I used to call myself a serial entrepreneur, working with grains and working with smallholder farmers. So while I was doing that, so I just to come back to climate for a second, this is the kind of stuff that you could do to reduce weeds and other things if you did, as you can see, back-breaking work of what we call row planting. The second you do that, weeds are going to grow here between the rows. Then you need to take a machine, and almost everywhere in the world, almost always, it's going to be something that you do with a manual machine driven by a person. Now, this is not always feasible for people, but there is one thing about, there are particularly these varieties that you can grow like this. And if I told you about the manual weeding, one thing about these methods, and there are a lot of people who promote these very aggressively. One thing about this is paddy fields are flooded. They are flooded not because the plant desperately needs flooding. They are flooded because to that farmer, it is the cheapest form of weed control. Because most weeds do not do well when flooded, paddy does fine. What happens when you inundate a field? Methane. You get very high levels of methane released from flooded paddy fields. So apart from cows and all the other sources of methane in agriculture, paddy fields is one of them. So if you can grow plants that do not require such high levels of inundation, that is also something you can do in terms of climate. But like I said, the plants are also more resistant to droughts, flooding, all those issues when it comes to the stress that is going to come from climate. Otherwise, these farmers are not going to be able to grow anything, which I've already seen with the farmers that I've worked with. There are seasons where they can't grow anything and they're just staring at the sky. So moving on, that was about what you can do for climate mitigation, and if you are affected by climate, saline intrusion, or all those things, what farmers could do. So I was given the opportunity to head group sustainability at a large telco or ICT company. So just to give you an idea of what large organizations, which many of you may think is the enemy, we try not to be. We do try to do something that is positive, and it's hard. It's hard sometimes at a big company, but with the right leadership and the right motivations, it is possible. So sustainability in the work that I do includes, there's a lot of other work we do, but it includes the core inward-looking sustainability performance management, as we call it. So I think a couple of my team members also may be on this call. So one of the things we're doing is, as for us as a tech company, our biggest footprint is energy. It is the carbon released from the energy that we consume that we need to manage. So over the years, we've been doing a lot of work to reduce absolute and relative amounts of carbon consumed in the work that we do. Again, not easy, because while we're reducing per tower or per person energy levels, the number of customers is growing up. The number of technologies being used by customers is going up. So we always have to look at it from multiple points of view to see are we really doing a better job or not. And of course, switching to photovoltaic or solar panels is something that we're doing. Difficult to do 100% because of the intermittent nature of renewables, but something that we're committing to increasing. Remember, for corporates, that a big thing is different seals of approval and standards. So the ISO 14001 standard is the environmental sustainability, environmental management system standard. Companies like having these little badges, right? So if you can say, okay, we are 14001 EMS certified company, you can get some support from the rest of your company, because this is something that we did. Some companies do certifications only parts of their business. We are working on this for the entire business, and the certification audit is going on right now. And we are kind of making sure we have all the data available for the auditor to answer the questions that they have. So this is an overall thing looking at environment management. So effect on climate related things mostly. As a company, we also focus on product responsibility. So we don't actually sell a lot of phones. The phones that we do sell, we sell at a loss or at cost, just to make sure that people who cannot find a phone anywhere else can at least get one from us. But we do feel a sense of responsibility for the people using a phone and what they do at the end of the life of that phone. We do other things that I won't talk about here for how people use their phones correctly, meaning not like idiots, basically, not taking selfies standing in front of trains, that kind of stuff. But this is about the product responsibility when it comes to the end of life of those devices. So where we work with internally again, as well as externally with customers, where we work on giving them an opportunity, because sometimes people want to be good, but they don't have the channel. They don't have a place. They don't have the convenience to do something. So when you're a big company, sometimes you can create some of that for your customers and stakeholders. And of course, one of the most important things is none of this will work if there are not more people like you. If there are not more people interested in this problem, interested in doing something about it, engaged in these topics. So that's why we have a lot of work internally and externally about creating that culture of understanding what is sustainability, thinking, how can I support, how can I do something about it? So this little logo you see here is probably the first time it's been seen in public. This is our internal logo. So the first word is in singular, api, which means we or us, saying we are sustainable, and something that goes on all our communications. Then the next part of this is nothing very happy, but kind of what happens because of climate change. So we have had some major natural disasters in Sri Lanka, or if you say the last 3 or 4 years, due to heavy unseasonal rains, much heavier than would normally be expected in terms of precipitation over a 24-hour period. And the Sri Lankans who are seeing this will know this is the Aranayaka landslides that happened in 2016. So this is the area that was affected and the number of human habitations that were affected. This is something that we did because basically an entire village was washed away. Something that we did working with the local government and the national government and the community. We helped them put up housing on land that had to be set aside from government land. So we had to be careful. Obviously, there are all the things about building back better, making sure that these habitations and this community is going to live in a more sustainable way, in more sustainable housing. So those are some of the things. But this is also something, so from a, I don't know whether you'd call this climate justice, but things that we have to do because people are getting displaced because of climate change. So this is a recent satellite photograph of that same area. You can see the long building that was under construction has been completed. So then climate solutions. So this is the family from a very rural part of our country that I met. So some things that Dialog has been doing. So Novil, if I'm right, I've taken about 17.5 minutes. So please let me know if I need to speed up or anything, but I'm on track, I believe, as far as timing goes. So this is a service, trilingual service that we have for farmers, again, focusing on a few things, particularly on advice. So starting with advisory information for farmers, and like in the previous situation, when there is unusual, unexpected weather, we send specific advice. So for each agriculture zone, climate zone, each crop, we send specific advice to these farmers. This happened, you need to do the following to recover from it, sometimes even before it happens. So pest outbreaks that may be climate change driven, if we get an early warning, we send out the advice on how to prevent it or minimize the effects. But we are also doing something that's much more ambitious, using, you may have heard the term IoT, Internet of Things, where we are, give me a second, please. We are working with different universities and other stakeholders to basically create resilience in a box, right? Because there are 2.2 million smallholder farmers in Sri Lanka, and they're basically screwed, right? Right now, there's almost nothing they can afford to do to get themselves out of the hole that they are anyway in economically before climate change even walks in. So this is something we've done where we've targeted to create something that they can, you've heard the term bootstrapping, I guess, right? Which is pulling yourselves up by the bootstraps. It's an American term, I guess, mostly, where you can start, take the profit of the last harvest, invest it in creating a protected zone. The term greenhouse is too strong for here because a protected housing it's much cheaper, it's much flimsier, but it gets the job done. It protects your crop from pest diseases and the vagaries of the weather. Then the problem with protected housing, you'd think, well, why isn't Sri Lanka covered in protected houses? Well, if you did it just like that, the farmer would be spending his or her entire day standing outside that, checking every 1 hour, every 2 hours to check that the conditions are correct for the crop. That's not going to work for a smallholder farmer. They have livestock, they have other crops, they might be running a small shop out of the front of their house, they have children to look after, so that's just not going to work. So what we did was, we did an automation kit that can plug into any protected house. And you could basically, if you had a protected house, that's great. Or you take the kit and you build it as it comes. Nothing, no rocket science here, right? But the thing we did was we looked aggressively at affordability. And what are the most affordable but good enough products? And we had to come up with some of our own devices to do this. And so basically, and it's working for different types of crops, including mushrooms, which is a very interesting case study that I can talk about maybe if I have time. These are some of the things that we had to create for this. You set this up inside your protected house. You say, this is the crop, this is the point in cultivation that I'm at, and you walk away. And you only need to really come in to pluck the harvest, which you can do every morning if it's a crop like salad cucumber, and the rest of the time you can live itself. Finally, I'll talk about climate justice. So you can see that this is a coastal community. These are day boat fishermen. These are the most marginalized in this segment. They can barely afford, basically what they can afford are boats like this. These are the guys who can at least afford a newer boat. Otherwise, they are even smaller. Yeah, I have a couple of more photographs that I can show you as well. But these are exposed boats. You can go out in it for a day, maybe that's it. And some of them are actually like this, right? It's just a raft that is going out in the ocean, in the open ocean. Some of them are, of course, like this, much narrower, but these are the kinds of things. So we did a service. Basically, the Department of Fisheries of the government of Sri Lanka works with the Department of Meteorology, and they know what is the weather that's going to happen in the next 24 hours. And if they could, they would alert these fishermen, but they're usually not able to get the message out to them. So we are working with them, and we've come up with a basic, again, dead simple service. All you need to know is how to read an SMS in your language, or Singlish or Tanglish as we call it, because it's in English script, but it's in your language, or to answer a phone call. All you need to know, sorry if you can hear some idiot in rush hour traffic, but all you need to know is how to press the green button and answer a call. And the calls that come in are the urgent ones. The SMS is a daily SMS that you get that tells you what the weather is going to look like over the next few hours, usually 24-hour period. And if it's going to be something more extreme than that, or if it's an urgent message, it comes to you as a pre-recorded message that is selected from what is the information that needs to go to you. So I have another 8 minutes. So I'm going to risk playing a video, if that's okay by the organizers.
Yeah, carry on, Charitha.
Yeah, so the button isn't showing, give me a second. Yeah, there you go. So some of it is not even weather. Some of it is what you could call regulatory stuff. And we're a small country, but 20 lives is still 20 lives. So in a given year, I mean, if we can reduce some of those also, to us, it's a big achievement, right? So as some of you may know, fishing is anyway considered the second most dangerous job category already. So this is a very economically important segment, even though the group that's involved in it is not necessarily treated very well, shall I say, or regarded very well. So we want to do something anyway for their quality of life. And again, because it's that climate justice thing is also part of it. They're providing so much. So many Sri Lankans eat fish, even if they don't eat meat or anything else. So we're working with these different agencies, and we already, it's only been a year. We launched this in April last year, but we've already had case studies ahead of the Niva and Burevi cyclones, where we had to get urgent warnings out to these groups of people. So SMSs in the millions, and these are the emergency calls that are dispatched, right? So this is the kind of...
All coastal vessel owners are advised to make sure that small vessels anchored at the beach and dockyards are towed maximum possible to the shore and permanently anchored, as there is a risk of tidal surges due to possible hurricanes. This is a message from the Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources.
I hope you're able to hear that. Yeah, so that's the kind of messages that we send. Interestingly, the agriculture services, we thought we only need to do them in the local languages, Sinhala and Tamil, but we try to be as inclusive as possible. So Sayuru, which is this service, we did it in English as well. And we have a higher than expected number of English language subscribers. So I'm wondering whether they are rich foreigners with their yachts anchored off the coast. But we had the same situation with the Niva cyclone thereafter as well. So this is how we've been doing this. And basically, I mean, it's not rocket science, but it's something to use technology to support this kind of requirement. So I'm a few minutes early, happy to stop there and happy to take your questions now or later on as well.
All right, thank you very much for that compelling presentation, Charitha. And I do hope some questions may be popping up for you at some point, so we'll keep an eye on that. Just like I said, I'm hoping from what we learned yesterday to have a couple of minutes at the end of the three presentations just to run a few commentary, because you know, a lot has been said here. And I think some of this needs a bit of further discussion. And, you know, if I had a chance later, I think I'll be quite interested, you know, to really see how you work effectively. Well, maybe effectively is a patronizing word, but, you know, it seems you're doing so much in a sector that is quite, you know, subjective. I've worked with rural farmers in my undergraduate days, and I know sometimes the most difficult thing is to change their perception of how to do things. And it's even worse, you know, when you're introducing technology, you know, but from some of the things, the information systems you've introduced, it seems you've got a formula, okay? And I think I'll be interested in knowing how you work on that from a cultural and social perspective. But thank you very much, Charitha, for your presentation. And without further ado, we'll go to the next speaker, and I'll be introducing them shortly. But if you've got any questions specifically for Charitha, please, by all means, put that on the chat box. And I'll be, okay, I'm going to introduce the second speaker now. Alahir Ratore is an expert in environmental impact assessments in Pakistan. She is an environmental management graduate from National College of Business, Administration and Economics. Over the years, Alahia has achieved certification in a number of issues relating to environment, education, and women's health from international institutes, such as in International Women's Health and Human Rights from Stanford University, Introduction to Family Engagement in Education from Harvard University, and taking a number of certifications from United Nations Development Program, UNDP, and Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, OPHI, in issues relating to designing multidimensional poverty index and nature-based solution for sustainable development. She has worked with a number of organizations, including piloting a project for WWF focused on converting biodegradable waste to natural fertilizers and running active plantation drives throughout Lahore. She is a strong advocate for taking practical approaches to Pakistan's rising environmental problems. Currently, she is working on a number of projects with the US Embassy and the Asia Foundation. She is the first Pakistani female children's book author working on a project with the European Union, advocating on environmental issues, recycling and sustainability. Alahia has also received a Duke of Edinburgh International Award for Young People, Bronze Standard for Public Services. And I'm sure would all join me in giving a very, very warm welcome to Alahia as you have the floor. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Justin. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Noble for giving me this wonderful opportunity. My topic for today is the impact of multidimensional poverty on climate change and plant drives. So when we talk about multidimensional poverty, how it affects the climate change, we're just going to go through the background information of what we will actually discussing today. We're just going to see what multidimensional poverty is, what climate change is, and how both of these are rational or irrational. South Asia region and its problems with poverty and climate change. Then we're going to talk about Pakistan and what Pakistan is doing for the environment, which is obviously climate change is one of the biggest issues. And at last, we'll see if there's any sustainable solution to all of this. Okay, so what multidimensional poverty actually is? Multidimensional poverty is basically, it complements three aspects that every human living being should have the right, is supposed to live on a certain boundary, which should include that the person is getting secure food, enough food. It also includes the fact that the person is not unemployed. And it also includes a very basic and very important third need, which is healthcare. So which leads multidimensional poverty into two different indicators, where one is that we can monitor the monetary, and the second one is the non-monetary. So in the monetary multidimensional poverty sector, we actually see that, you know, if somebody is poor, we can measure that. If somebody is unemployed and how and what healthcare they're getting, we can, you know, measure all of that. In the non-monetary, that is what we cannot measure is the standard of education, the gender equality, and the climate effect on the poor people. We can't measure these, but they go through all of this. The South Asia region is actually one of those very much affected. It's non-monetary poverty, and it goes way beyond on the poverty index, which includes Pakistan's, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and, you know, Maldives, all of these South Asian countries. What multidimensional poverty index of South Asia is? So the poverty index of South Asia is that 486 million people are multidimensionally poor, and they lack access to at least one of the three environmental indicators. Now, one of the three environmental indicators can be they don't have clean water, they don't have sustainable use of, they don't have sustainable resources, both the renewable and the non-renewable resources, or they're going through very harsh weather, whether it's extremely hot or it's extremely cold. And South Asia region particularly is the most vulnerable region, which is both directly and indirectly, it is affected, and it is affecting the climate change, which includes the rise of temperature, the change in the rain pattern, and the droughts, floods. It counts everything. Obviously, when there's a climate change, there's everything going together. Okay, this picture, again, this graph, I don't have to say much about it because it itself says everything. This is the poverty index of the entire world. And this is the poverty index of the South Asia region. This is how the entire world is, all of the world has the poverty index. And this is the South Asian region, which includes, Pakistan. This is how much poor people we have in our region, in the South Asian region. Oh, so am I audible? Is there any problem with that?
It's all well. It's all well. Carry on, Alaya.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I'm not just talking to myself. Okay. So the impact of multidimensional poverty and climate change. Multidimensional poverty has to do with climate change. So the the UN has made 40 of these little impacts that we need to go through by 2030, which are the Sustainable Development Goals. And according to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, if social, economical, and environmental issues are not, these three pillars are not standing together, then there is going to be a poverty index, and we're going to have multidimensional poverty. And we're going to talk about how environment and poverty are connected together. So people use the income people have from forest is 1.6 billion people make money from forest, 5.5 billion depend on water, and 3 out of 5 families have their energy resources from forest, and 4 billion people are actually using forest for medication and pharmacy. But if the agricultural land of one country isn't going pretty well because nobody keeps, we don't upgrade our agricultural land, we use them. The moment they become infertile, they don't give any more food crops, we cut down forests and make new land. And that's what affects 1.6 billion people, 5.5 billion people, and again, we come back to the multidimensional poverty. Now, this is the graph of climate change. We're almost about right here somewhere, right now, currently in 2021. And if we don't stop the aggressive emissions, we're probably going to go somewhere this high. And if we try to improve it, which I hope one day we'll come back to this point in the near future. If we stop the emissions, or if we don't stop the emissions. Climate change, climate change is basically human emissions of greenhouse gases, which is giving us a large scale shift in the weather patterns, and 90% of them is the carbon dioxide and methane emission, and the use and burn of obviously fossil fuels and deforestation is what is causing the climate change. Now, climate change in Pakistan and South Asia region is that it was okay by this point. Now it is drastically growing, and it's becoming higher and higher. And that's exactly what we don't want. This is the highest point of South Asia region entire. In this graph here, we have the change of climate and rain pattern of only Pakistan. To this point, everything was okay. To this point, it was normal. And by the time things, became drastically improving. And this is the point where people don't even know, don't even have any awareness on the climate change in Pakistan. And this is just basically the temperature, precipitation pattern of Pakistan in last 18 years. Now, poverty and climate change, what they actually have to do together is that usually for when we use reusable resources, for example, we use forests, we use agricultural land, there's not much investment required for the poor people. Hence, they only take land and they have their income from agriculture or from the forest directly. But how this affects is because then there's an excessive use of natural resources, which leads to the imbalance in the climate, because we are deprived out of natural resources, and that is also causing the climate change together. So this leads us to the type 3, that there is no sustainable usage pattern, and there's a lack of knowledge, which is also causing the climate change in the South Asia region and Pakistan. Poverty and climate change in Pakistan is something that we really need to work on, because there's a climate change which is bringing us repeatedly back to the same poverty index every now and then. Even though Pakistan has fallen from 64.3% of the poverty index and is now almost 24.3% in 2015, but that has led us to Pakistan being the 8th most affected country because of the climate change, and are suffering because of the climate change. And the most important part in all of this is that we are mainly agricultural land. Our resources, our GDPA is highly depending on agricultural land in Pakistan. So one important thing about Pakistan's social economic status is that there's 15 billion people who are actually rich. There's 25 billion people who are upper class. That doesn't even make half of the country. And then there is 65 million people who are lower middle class, and they have the same amount of people who are desperately poor. So if there is a change in the climate, if there is any change that is going to be lack of resources or the climate change, both of these will collaborate and become one. And then we have 130 million people who are actually suffering from A, climate change, and B, poverty altogether again. How Pakistan is dealing with climate change? Yeah, so we have a budget of 802.65 million rupees annually, and the current Prime Minister Imran Khan has launched a 10 billion tree tsunami for planting tree across the nation in the span of 5 years. And we have also announced one date, that is 18th August, to be marked as Plant for Pakistan Day. So everybody plants a day on this particular day, which we're hoping will make impact. Now, even though we're working on everything that we can, there's still lack of resilience and mitigation. Why is that? We're making efforts, but we're not getting anything. That is because leading us to the next important part, that there is strategy, there is implementation, but that doesn't work together. And that is because there is a lack of environmental laws in Pakistan. There is lack of awareness, again, which is very important. And also there's lack of implementation. Now, both of these things work. Even somebody's doing work in these two sectors, there is no strong implementation, because there's no laws that are, making, there are not people who are not working in the law sector, environmental law sector, even though we have laws for the industrial sector, but we should also have laws for the agriculture sector. Now, what are the solutions that are easy to implement and are sustainable? They're simple and easy, is that we should have, and not only in Pakistan, by that I mean we can have these 3 awareness, plantation drive, awareness campaigns, and act by taking it seriously. We should have this working in entire South Asia region. This is something very easy to do, and is also something that we need to improve the environment. Hopefully, this is one of those things that awareness is very important. Plant drives are very important, and we see people don't even take environmental and climate change very seriously. So we need to make sure that people take it very seriously. How it is effective is planting trees and not only provide us with natural resources, with food and timber or oxygen, it also helps the improvement in the rising temperature, and it also can help us with the food chain and sustainability, because when we plant one tree, we give different various biodiversities and microorganisms that we don't see. A food chain. One thing is going to consume on another. It's going to make a cycle by just planting one tree. If we have one tree, we have one food chain cycle, and that's going to help the biodiversity, the animals as well, the birds who are going to live on the trees. That's going to make difference. And if we have an effort from 7 billion people around the globe, if we make 7 billion people, you know, one person plant one tree, we have 7 billion trees. We have 7 billion ways of sustainability. We have 7 billion ways of innovation. We have 7 billion ways of making our food chain more active, because the climate change is directly cutting through the food chain, which is disturbing the entire food chain. And the reason why I'm really focused on multidimensional poverty is because the poor people don't have enough education. So there's a lack of education, which leads to the lack of knowledge about climate change, and they don't have a sustainable sustainable way of using their resources. So we need that we need the awareness, which bring us to the third goal, that we need awareness, and with that we will have both sustainability and innovation. Once you have awareness about something, you try to make sure that you do it sustainably, and also you make sure that there's some innovative idea that should come to you. And yeah, so in last 10 years, how it is effective in Pakistan, because in last 10 years, people usually didn't know enough about the climate change, about how they're affecting the climate, how about what deforestation is going to do to us, which we're facing right now. So now people take it quite seriously. In every 2,000 people, there is one person who is either working in an NGO for sustainability, for poverty, or for awareness about the climate change. And then there's also children from class 10 and O levels. They've started plant drives. That is one thing that we're really, really working on. And we think that one thing that is going to bring a huge change is plant drives. So now that the plant drive is something that is commonly known by almost everybody. So the O levels in class 10 kids are working on that. And they have this green ribbon movement, work in this organization called Bunyad Pakistan. And we have planted around 5,600 trees in 1 year right now, because we think that a sustainable way of improving the climate and the life for the people is by planting trees. Also, the WWF Pakistan is also enthusiastically working for climate change. I have been a part of this. I've also worked that there is less emission of chlorofluorocarbons, is a less emission of methane gas, and how organic stuff should be reused so that it is sustainably used and saved for the upcoming generations. With that, I end my presentation.
Third presenter is Ibrahim Muhammad, Dr. Ibrahim Muhammad, I have to say. And he is the Deputy Director General, Environmental Protection Agency, Maldives. A Bachelor of Science in the University of South Pacific, and has joined the Environmental Ministry as a teacher. He then completed a Master of Applied Science in Protected Area Management from the James Cook University of Australia, and completed his doctorate from James Cook University in 2017. Dr. Ibrahim has been working in the environment sector of Maldives since 2006. He has worked in various departments of the Environment Ministry and has been working as Deputy Director General of Environmental Protection Agency since October 2011. His research focus is on climate change adaptation of Maldivian islands, with a major focus on resilience and adaptive capacity of island communities. He has a special interest in salty urbanism and building resilient island communities for a post-sea level rise scenario for Maldives. He has a vision of creating buoyant ecologies as a transformative adaptation for Maldives. And we want to give a very, very huge welcome to you, Dr. Ibrahim Muhammad, as you have the floor. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Novel, and also the organizers. And with your permission, I'll share my screen. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, yes, we can.
All right. So let me start. I thought that yesterday the speakers were very articulate about the physical science, and we ended with the social aspects of climate change. And this evening we again started with the socio angle of adaptation. So from hard science, we are now today talking a bit more about adaptation. So what I'm going to talk to you about is the COVID as a litmus test for us to make positive changes. And let me begin. Well, Novel asked me to present a bit of pictures about Maldives because people often think Maldives as a good holiday destination. In fact, it is one of the most idyllic tourist destinations, especially for Europeans, especially from coming from England as well. So in my presentation, I will look at the need and the significance, what is happening with the COVID and what resilience is about for islands, and little bit end note with the future transformation for a resilient island country. So first of all, Maldives, I think everybody knows we are in the one of the lowest nation in South Asia. Also, we have the highest because Nepal is the highest point and Maldives is the lowest point. So we are only 1.5 meter above sea, and we are just in the equator and just below Sri Lanka. And Maldives is made up of atolls, which is we have about 26 geographical atolls and very small islands, about 1,192 islands we have. About 196 islands is dedicated for human habitation, so it is inhabited by people. And we also have 132 islands which are exclusive for tourism. And we have one island, one hotel concept. So each island is a hotel where you can come and enjoy the whole island. And our total population is close to 500,000, less than 1 million. Total land area is very small because only 1% is land, which is close to now 300 square kilometers, which is about 1% of the total territory of Maldives. So you can imagine we have 99% ocean. And as I mentioned, the elevation is only 1.5 meter above sea level for the islands. But yeah, then we depend on fishery and tourism because we are an ocean, a nation of ocean and islands. So just very brief, even yesterday, respected colleagues talked about the climate variations. And for Maldives also, what we are seeing is that the rainfall, as mentioned yesterday in the presentations, for the whole Southeast Asian region, there is a rainfall change, especially the intensity of rainfall is changing, but we are also getting less wet days, but on the days it rains, it is very intense. So we are getting higher than normal cumulative rainfall, but overall dry days are also more because the rainfall is concentrated onto few days, but intensive rain. And sea level rise, actually, this is quite conventional. What we see is about 0.03 meter, that's a few millimeter increase per decade. But this data is not very good, as it does not account for the Arctic melting of the Antarctic as well as the Arctic. And we have recently seen the Arctic and Antarctic melting is rapidly increasing. So we might have more than this much, and we are expecting that by end of this century, we will have about a 0.5 meter rise in sea level. So if we are only 1.5 meter above sea level, even a half-meter rise could inundate most of the land on the islands. And temperature increase is very much seen now. All over the country, we see that the annual decadal increase by about 0.21 degrees Celsius in both northern and southern part of the Maldives. So by the end of the century, we are expecting a range between 1.8 to 5 degrees Celsius to be the temperature, which is going to be very abnormal. And then, when we talk about COVID, we know that COVID is an alarm bell which came to us, but there has been many alarm bells coming to us. We have seen forest fires in Brazil and Australia in 2019, which destroyed huge swaths of land, killing millions of animals. Since the 1950s, the oceans are getting deoxygenated, and ocean dead zones have started increasing by 4 or 5 times. And we are also seeing the Great Barrier Reef, especially getting bleached, and bleaching episodes are also happening in the Maldives, which normally happen every 25 to 30 years before the 80s, is now happening every 5 to 6 years. So we have also seen that the last few decades have been gradually warming, and the warming is very much dangerous to the coral reefs because the ocean absorbs a lot of heat. And recent studies also show that the global food system is also disrupted, and we are losing the arable land, about 0.5% of arable land annually. So looking at this, the alarm bells have been ringing, and lots of scientists have been telling us that we are on the verge of collapse, but it's not going to happen, because if we learn and if we change things, we still have a chance to revive. So the pandemic, this pandemic can either break us or make us, and this is our opportunity actually to rebuild. And very rightly, the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said that we must build back better after the pandemic and move to a fairer, greener, and more resilient global economy. And he also has emphasized that we don't need to reinvent and come up with new frameworks or global agreements, because we have lots of global agreements. We have the Paris Agreement, we have different agreements on various aspects like desertification, biodiversity conservation. We have Convention on Biological Diversity. We have the Sustainable Development Goals. So he emphasized that rather than trying to reinvent and reconvene the whole global leaders and all the nations, we better start from the Sustainable Development Goals, because we already have it, and then we move forward with it for a greener recovery. And being prepared and ready is the best thing we can do, because the earth is continuously facing these crises, and these crises should be taken as an opportunity to rebuild and transform to a better future. So what happened to Maldives in COVID-19? A 2020 report by the United Nations program in the Maldives have stated that tourist arrivals have definitely declined. We are depending on tourism entirely because it's the main source of our revenue. Main source for GDP is from tourism. But in 2020, the tourism declined by 68%, and the tourism revenue declined by 39%. And this was a time we realized that hang on, tourism is is not really the way forward. We should think rather that, you know, tourism is a very fragile, volatile industry which we need to think about and diversify our economy. And in the midst of this pandemic, we also had 47 inhabited islands facing water shortage, and water has to be supplied from other islands or other places. And also our food security was really really disrupted, and we became very food insecure. We had to rely on the Indian government food aid. Sooner we began the pandemic, we had supply chain disruption because we entirely depend on imported food for most of our food needs. And also our government services, except the essential health services, a lot of public services were disrupted. Even the parliament was not having their normal sessions. So we had a really shocking event since the pandemic began, and there is many sectors, every sector, especially young people, the school children, everybody is impacted due to this. So let's look at the island dynamics. You know, on the left, I have put a picture of Male, which is our capital city, which is the densest populated place on Earth. It's only 2 square kilometers, but we have more than 120,000 people living in this 2 square kilometer island. And on the other side, I have shown a picture of a small island, which is about, which is also less than 2 square kilometers. But if you look at the island in the 60s and then compare it to 2017, you could see that the islands have a very intricate balance, and if we go beyond the thresholds and the limits, the island may not longer recover. For instance, on this island, you could see they have built a harbor by, you know, dredging part of the island. And then what happens is the coastal system, the stability of the coastal system is lost. So we started getting erosion. So on this part of the island is now gone. Some parts on the southern side of the island is now eroding. So this island now has to get reclaimed, or you know, they need to add more land by putting sand around the island. So we have to have a resilient approach in our everyday life. I mean, we are on a very fragile environment. We are exposed to a lot of overlapping stresses, including climate change. So what is, so let's look at how in an island the system is, you know, like any culture or any human community, the islands are also a social ecological system where the natural system and the social system is integrated. And if this system at various levels, at micro, meso, and macro level, is exposed to various kind of disruptions, then we may lose our capacity to adapt, leading to a maladapted and resilient lost system. So we have to make sure these interactions, social ecological interactions, which happens on our islands, is properly managed and properly built with resilience. So let's talk about what resilience means. So these are very modern ways of developing islands in the Maldives. What you can see is a picture of one island in 1969 and the same island in 2017. And this is an island reclaimed in 2015. And now this is what this island looks like. We have 25-story buildings coming up on a reclaimed island where we have reclaimed the reef, because we have an absolute scarcity of land. So what are we doing to build resilience? Is this resilience? This is a good question we can think about. So what are the attributes of resilience for islands? For an island to be resilient, it has to have a diversity of the biogeophysical system, meaning that the entire coastal marine system, because islands by themselves are, the Maldivian islands are nothing but a part of a reef, we call it. We call this, the entire Maldives as a huge reef, coral reef. So all the elements of a coral reef must be intact, and both the functional diversity of the coastal marine system and also the response diversity has to be maintained. What I mean is all the processes which happen in the coastal marine environment, the ocean waves, the currents, the biological processes, the food chain, everything is so well connected. And this is so much dependent for our habitation and our life. If anything gets disrupted, these functions, then we will lose our resilience. And our boundaries, the islands by themselves are very dynamic, even though we may see them as a piece of land in the middle of the sea. These islands actually have their own dynamism. Every year, twice the island's beach changes, the direction, the sand around the beach moves with monsoonal changes. The southwest monsoon will carry it to a different direction, and the northeast monsoon, the two different monsoonal periods, we see there's a lot of dynamism. So these boundaries, we must respect these dynamic systems, and we should not disrupt this system, because once it is disrupted, then we will start losing our resilience. And our reserves of water, soil, and other resources are very, very fragile. We don't have surface running water like rivers or lakes. We only have underground, very thin layer of fresh water. And it is very prone to salinization if there is a flood or wave inundation. So these are also very important for resilience to maintain. As I mentioned, our socio-ecological interactions, and also for resilience, we need to have very quick interventions. If there is a flood due to a storm surge coming from the ocean, and if the salt water remains on the island for a couple of days, the vegetation will be killed, because salinity can kill a lot of vegetation. So we can't wait without any intervention, even for a small disruption. And our social capital, the way our islanders, the cohesion, bonding, linking, and cultural aspects are very critical for resilience as well. And another aspect is innovation and our learning, and we always have to be on the curve to innovate, because on an island, you can't survive if you are not an innovative person, because a lot of challenges are faced when you are living on an island. And our governance, we need to have adaptive and bottom-up governance, because the islanders have to have a say in their way of building the islands or governing them. So how do we apply resilience for islands? According to Professor Brian Walker, the task is not about us planning or thinking or imagining where to go. But what we have to do is to choose where we should not go, by avoiding these thresholds and these sensitive, intricate balances to unmanageable states. So we should be very careful if we are doing any kind of development or any kind of huge structures on an island, because these thresholds, once it is passed, we can no longer recover from the damages. It will be irreversible. And we should not imagine an island is a continental land where, you know, everything can be permanent, because one of the natural features of islands is they are not permanent, they are not sedentary. You cannot have very permanent fortified, you know, you have to respect the dynamism of the island and accommodate the fluidity and the kind of environment around it. And we have to be ready to accept some inefficiencies, you know, and there are several ways of doing the same thing. We should not think that everything we build, everything we design should be practical and 100% efficient, because, you know, that's where we make a lot of wrong decisions. If we build a road on an island, we should not think that it will be 100% efficient, because the islands are so flat, and you know, if the road is raised, then we will face flooding. And we need to transform into a different kind of system, you know, instead of reclaiming land and killing our reefs and, you know, fortifying the structures. You know, there's a saying that Maldives wants to make Dubai and Dubai wants to make Maldives. So I was wondering why are we Maldivians imagining that we should create a mini Dubai in Maldives, but the Dubai people are trying to create a mini Maldives in Dubai. So, you know, why should we think like this? This is the reality. So we should actually accept our reality and move towards transformability with the reality we have, because we can't create a Singapore or Dubai in Maldives. We have different challenges, we have different geographies and different conditions. So you can't just have you know, hundreds of 50 or 25-story buildings on a small island and imagine that this mini Dubai will be the future, or will make us resilient. So to understand resilience, I think we some of you might have seen this adaptive cycle. So imagine this island, which is shown the 1969 aerial picture. So this island was inhabited island. It was very small, less than 1 square kilometers probably. And what happened was, this island, of course, was in this phase in the 60s. It was growing, and then it was people were, you know, becoming more prosperous, building more, and then all of a sudden, what happened was, they were quite fairly developed island, and in 2004 the Indian Ocean tsunami hit, and everything on the island got washed away. You know, people had to be relocated. And there was a sudden breakdown of everything. There was a crisis. And then what happened was, we rebuilt it. You know, you can see that we reclaimed, we made the island big, we fortified around it with a very expensive revetment, millions of dollars spent. Huge granite boulders were brought from other countries, because Maldives does not have mountains or anything. And this island was covered in this granite boulder revetment. And then we built it, rebuilt after the tsunami, with a lot of donor aid and a lot of government spending as well. And now the island is in a reorganized and in a you know, bounced back to its normal. So in the adaptive cycle, this is what happens. You know, the world was going through a phase of growth. Every country, the GDP was growing, most countries except few countries, and then suddenly we were hit by the pandemic, the COVID, and now we are in this situation where, you know, we should use our innovation and opportunity and reorganize to a better society and be rebuilt. So this adaptive cycle is quite important if we are to be resilient. And this is most of the talks on resilience will always talk about this. So I thought I would share it with you guys as well. So what are our solutions? What should we do to, you know, become resilient? We must embrace this change and the uncertainty, because living on an island, you will face a lot of uncertainties every day. You know, the waves, the ocean, the currents. It's a very vulnerable, exposed environment you are living, especially, you know, the economy and every aspect. So we should embrace this, and we should be ready to build new pathways and new possibilities always. And we must build systems that will be safe when they fail, rather than, you know, trying to build fail-proof systems. What we are now trying to build is everything which is fail-proof. We are building a lot of coastal infrastructures, a lot of coastal protections. Like you might be surprised the way the capital Male Island is protected with concrete, huge tetrapod stones, which is also built by the Japanese government as a Japanese aid, which cost millions and millions of dollars. So we should also explore and innovate and find adaptive pathways for future through guided self-organization. You know, we should think about the limits, the barriers, and organize ourselves and use crisis as an opportunity. This is the best time for us to rebuild, because we have learned what are our vulnerabilities, what is the most fragile part of our islands and the communities. So my hope is that, you know, because the Paris Agreement and most of the climate change agreements are still indeterminate, we are not very clear whether we can achieve the goals, whether the sea level rise can be stopped. And the trajectory is that even if we stop global warming today, the legacy of the warming will continue and sea level rise will continue. So we have to build, we have to embrace the fluid nature of Maldives. 99% of our country is water. So why not make use of this? We cannot develop like continental land masses. You know, we cannot go on making more land by destroying our coral reefs. So we have to embrace this fluid modernity and go for over the water living. But unfortunately, sadly, the government is reclaiming more islands, building more roads, more concrete, and, you know, everything about development is very hard engineered, very rigid structures, which is actually the opposite to what resilience is teaching us. So we should actually move from this trajectory of this trope of hard engineered, very, very, you know, permanent structures built on the islands by causing irreversible damages to very fragile coastal marine systems. So more of our COVID recovery investments needs to be focused on our food security and our green growth. And we learned that tourism is a very fragile investment and economic activity for us, because tourism was hardest hit by the COVID. But yet, you know, we are developing more tourism. We are now focusing again on building more tourism and building tourist hotels on every island possible. In fact, we are trying to reclaim lagoons and reefs to build more resorts. So there is a word used in the academic community called stupidity in tourism. So I sometimes wonder whether we are in that now. So this is what's happening. As I told you, you know, islands are being reclaimed to the edge of the reef, and then they have to be fortified with very expensive coastal protection, often by bringing granite and huge boulders. The transport cost alone is millions. And the reclamation cost per hectare is plus 4 million rupiah. 1 rupiah is about, $1 is about 15.5 rupiah. So you can imagine for 1 hectare, we spend 4 million rupiah, and yet we are on this trajectory. So, but what I expect is that, without reclaiming, without destroying these lagoons, we can live over the water. We have to find this solution. And yet the politicians are to be convinced, because they think, efficiency and practicality is more important. Doing things the way it has been done forever is the way to go, but that is not what resilience is teaching us. So this group of architects are also now colleagues of mine, which I came across them. Then they came to do a project in the Maldives about floating architecture. And the architectural ecologies lab in the California College of the Arts are actually in their master's students class having a special program on Maldives. And the architect students are exposed to Maldivian culture and Maldivian way of living and Maldivian environment. And they are given opportunity to come up with structures which could be, made resilient for the future of Maldives. And they have come up with amazing architectural designs. And I'm very thankful for their work. And I hope that this will happen in the future, and we will be more resilient in the future. And that's all from me. Thank you very much. Novel, I will end with a nice picture. This is pole and line fishing in the Maldives. You know that in the Maldives, our fishing in the tuna fishing industry is sustainable because we don't use nets to catch fish. We use this pole and line. So it's the world's one of the rare dolphin-friendly fisheries in the world. And thank you very much, everyone. And hopefully we will have a discussion at the end of next speaker.
All right. Thank you again, Dr. Ibrahim, for that very, very compelling presentation. I think it's really getting warmer and warmer. And I'm not sure if it's just myself, but the pictures Ibrahim shared at the beginning kind of made it look irresistible to go for a holiday, in Maldives, despite the challenges you mentioned. It looks like it's one of my top two goals after the pandemic, and I'm sure you're open to get more people as well. Hopefully we can start building back your tourist coffers.
No, we are very lucky. Tourism is picking up compared to many destinations. Maldives is lucky.
Yeah, and of course with countries opening up their borders again, although quite tentatively, there's kind of the risk of going back to where we all started from, isn't it? So we're in the middle of that. How do we get that balance? And it's actually part of everything you've talked about in terms of resilience. It's knowing how far we can go, because at the middle of all of this is the tension between uncertainty and reality. And sometimes political heads and government officials don't really know how to balance that tension, which you want to do more and more. You want to create more islands and then getting into more trouble, but at the middle of that, you want to balance the economic prosperity of the country as well, because we speak safety, they speak money, Exactly. So how do we get all of those balanced? But I think you've got very, very cracking points you've made, and I'm hoping we can have, even if it's 10 minutes of discussion, then convert into discussion. So well done. And, I think, again, special thanks go to the way these sessions has been arranged. like most people have said, yesterday we started with the core science, with evidence of how climate change is, becoming very palpable, something from a very scientific perspective. We saw experts talking about rains, droughts, and, today it's more about the social science aspect of things and how, grassroots can drive all of these changes. Sometimes the little things are those things that really make the most effect. And let the tree planting exercise begin. I think, Alaiha has really emphasized how important it is to plant trees. And I think if, the 26 of us here can adopt that and plant 26 trees wherever we are, I think we're contributing to the vision, isn't it? And hopefully, Charita as well, you can include that in your information management systems that you talked about with, the rural farmers in your country. Okay, so without much ado, thank you again, Alaiha, for this presentation. And I'm going to open the floor now. I think we've got 13 minutes to discourse, and hopefully we can all wrap all of these together before I hand over to Noville to round off the session. So it won't, gonna make this very fluid, very, very natural, okay? So if anyone has got points or questions you wanna ask to any of the three speakers, or, maybe just a commentary you wanna add to what has been said so far, please, by all means, use the raise hand functionality and I'll give you the floor. Otherwise, you can also type your questions and then we shall read them out. Okay, Charitha says, I can actually share something about a Facebook for trees our colleagues have done, time permitting. Yeah, Charitha, you can go for it.
Okay, sure. So since Justin was suggesting what can we do building on what Alaiha has done, I just thought I'll share. This is not something that is officially part of Dialog's work. It actually was first funded by our internal volunteering program because a few of our colleagues wanted to get doing it. We have an internal volunteering program where people had to pitch ideas that are sustainability oriented. So they pitched this idea for a Facebook for trees, basically to encourage people to plant trees, to know what they're planting and how to care for it. And then to gamify the whole thing by posting updates, sharing photographs of how their plant is doing. And basically, so it's now a website and an app called, I'll actually type it in the chat. Go have a look, thuru.lk. So one of my good friends was also there. They've actually now left the company to pursue this and other social entrepreneurship ideas full time. So they actually now are full service. I mean, they provide you the seeds, they have a nursery, they do everything needed to help you get trees growing in your garden or whatever land you have. So it is possible. And so you can account for all the carbon and all those things because it's tracked in the app.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you, Charita, for shedding a bit of more light. I can see a question from Noville, but it's very exciting how we can tie all of these points from the three speakers together. And the first time I sat on a workshop about climate change, part of the very persuasive comment we heard was, tree planting. But then on the downside, we hear stuff like deforestation. And I think that leads to the question Noville has asked, because here in the UK, I remember when I started my master's in 2009 at Coventry University in the West Midlands. We used to submit coursework with paper, and you realize that there's quite, very, very open system where people can print off any sort of paper. And I remember some experts saying, for every printing you make, you're actually falling one tree. it doesn't make sense then, but I think from this conversation today, most of us can understand why, tree planting is quite important, but it's not just planting of trees. What do we do to maintain that? Because if you're planting 1 million trees and then you're cutting 1 million trees, what's the logic behind it? So there's a need to balance things at the end of the day. And I think the question Novi has asked, I'll throw that to you, Alaiha, as well. How do we make sure that planted trees are looked after well?
Okay, yeah, that is actually very good question. So what happened is when you conduct a plant drive, you take the environmental sector or a person from the environmental sector who actually, plant the waters around the streets and the roads. So you collaborate with them and you sign a petition with them that, I'm planting like 500 trees or 800 trees. And you make sure that they sign this petition that you're going to take care of plants. You're going to provide them with water because we're planting them on the governmental land. This is no one's property, so this is government's responsibility to provide us with the water resources. And also with that, so there are different types of trees that we can plant. For example, because it doesn't always rains here in Pakistan. There's a certain period of time where we have a lot of rain and then there is no rain at all. So we have botanic types of plants. For example, the timber, you can plant it like a 6 feet tall tree, and it doesn't require a lot of water. It just keeps growing. And if somebody's not even watering that particular type of tree, it's still going to keep growing. Sometimes you don't just plant trees because, hey, I'm planting a tree and I want it to give me fruits and I want to have fruit from it by the end of the day. Just planting it because you want this is the basic type of the tree that we plant. Timber trees they take less water, they keep growing. Even in very hot climate where there is no rain, they're going to just keep growing. But when they get rain, they store the rainwater and then they use it when there is no rain.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for sharing that insight. And just to mention, Charitha has put a link as well on the project he mentioned earlier on the chat box. So if anybody wants to have a look on the work going on in that regard, it's www.thuru.lk. Okay, so the website is on the link. All right, thank you as well. I'm still opening the floor for questions, commentary, contributions on any aspect of the themes we covered today. Okay. I'll just give a couple of seconds more, and if not, I'll be happy to end this slightly early today. I think it's been very, very fascinating discussions, going from the hard science of rains and droughts and fires, from yesterday to the human aspect of things. And tomorrow as well, we've got very exciting presentations. Well, I would leave that to Noville to wrap up. Okay, if there are no other questions or commentaries, I'll have to say thank you to everyone who's attended today, and I'll hand over to Noville to give us further announcements, and we look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow. It's my pleasure to host you today. Over to you, Noville.
Thank you very much, Justine, for hosting today's session. I think it was very interesting to hear from different perspectives, starting off from Charita about smallholder farmers and how the corporate sector would try to be responsibly contributing in the fight against climate change. And then we were very fascinated by the
great work being done in Maldives, and Ibrahim's very honest and critical look at the initiative. So that kind of a genuine, open and honest discussions are very important. And I think there are a lot of things that we have to learn from Maldives, not on the technicalities, but about being open about the interventions and being self-critical. And that kind of thinking is lacking. I think it's lacking everywhere. So I think it's really insightful, and how Ibrahim mentioned about floating villages or floating structures. I mean, that kind of out of the box thinking is so important for us to be proactive against climate change. And then finally, actually the second presentation. So Alahia was, had some challenges in connecting with us, but actually, so she was presenting to herself, as she said, but we were able to connect through Manur, her kind sister, who helped us to get back to her. So, and it really worth us trying to get Alahia back, and it was such inspiring information that you share about tree planting and also about multidimensional poverty. So all these things are very much interconnected, poverty, climate change, and what we should do. So thank you very much for your presentations. And so tomorrow we will have the third day of our session. So there we would be looking at 3 presenters. We will have another one great presenter, Khadija Abid, Assistant Director for the Climate Change Adaptation Program of German Red Cross from Pakistan. And then we will be listening to Rangita Balasurya, Environmental and Climate Change Focal Point for International Organization for Migration. So migration is taking a new dimension. Climate migration is becoming a big problem. And then finally, we will have a very interesting presentation from Avash Pandey from Nepal. So Avash Pandey will be talking about monitoring and about how they are looking at the, the Himalayas and different changes that they are observing and measures that we are taking to address climate change. So now we have covered from the Maldives to the Himalayas. So we will have very interesting deliberations tomorrow as well. So please join, and please bring in some friends if you can. And yesterday's presentation, we have made it into a video documentary, and it is I have already shared on the Resilience Tube YouTube channel. We will do the same with today's presentation. So whenever you want to pull out this information, you can visit the channel and listen to the sessions even later. And also, I would like to invite all of you to contribute to the International Journal of Community Resilience. Special invitation for the speakers today to put it in paper, whatever the ideas you can, and we can help you to improve it and then publish it as a special issue in the Solve Climate issue in the journal. And also to all this participants, if you have any interesting thing about community resilience, please feel free to submit an article. We will publish it after the peer review and improvement process. And today also, I would like to end the session by thanking the 2 volunteers who helped us to organizing this event, Taranga Sachintani and Minoli Malka. So, they were very instrumental in making this event a success. So thank you very much, all 3 speakers, Charita, Ibrahim, and Alahia, as well as for Justine for being our host today. So it's sharp 7 o'clock, so we will end here, and we hope to see you all tomorrow for the third and the final day session. Thank you very much.